Everyone, welcome to Changing Spaces as we explore the next leg of my journey. So, as many of you know, I started the trip a few weeks ago, and this is about the next leg of my trip. So, this is returning to Bute. So, hi everyone. As you know, it's Mel, and welcome back to Changing Spaces. Today, the episode is one I've been waiting for, though I didn't know how powerful it would be until I lived it. It's about arriving on the Isle of Bute, my mum's birthplace, and unexpected stories, emotions, and connections that unfolding the moment I set foot there. But I'm just going to take you back a couple of years because I haven't been to Scotland since I was a teenager, and I hadn't been onto the island since I was about 11. And it was when I was talking with my uncle in 2022 about us planning a trip up to Scotland and what route we might take and when we might go. Do we go for the Highland Games? Because he used to take part in that. That sort of really sowed the seed. But I never thought, I never really thought I might end up going on my own, and that if so, in what way? Because in 2022, up until the day before New Year's Eve, my uncle was still alive, and so he passed unexpectedly. He wasn't sick or anything, and it literally just happened without us expecting it. And so everything was shelved. And then a year later is when I bought, early in 2024, I got my camper van. And if you've been following any of my journey, you'll know that I've been to various places across the UK. It's all aimed at just inspiring people to get out and experience some of the new stuff, to whether it's to make a big change and transition in our lives or just to get out of the mundane and create some new dopamine hits. So that's kind of what Changing Spaces is about. But it's this recent project is about going deeper into history, landscape, culture, our backgrounds, the things that influence us. So this particular episode, as you know, I've already visited Windsor, London, Cambridge, York, Whitby, Scarborough, Filey, Carlisle, and then drove up to Greenock and got the ferry over to Bute. And it was when I got to Carlisle when the sense of actually maybe even getting to Scotland, because it's not close, I live near London, so it's a fair trek, and a trek that I've been doing over the last few weeks. And kind of had an idea of where I would, go, but the weather's changed massively in the last 2 weeks. And like I said, if you've seen any of the videos, you'll know that I've also had some van issues. But this one, I left Carlisle, like I said, determined to reach Bute on the 29th of December, as it was the anniversary of my mum's passing. And when I started out on the trip, we were meant to be, after York, going to Carlisle, Hadrian's Wall, and then up to Edinburgh, and then I was going to make my way from there. But there was quite a few things that stopped that plan. And that's how it goes sometimes. And I've talked about that in some of the other blogs and podcasts. Excuse me, I'm getting a sip of water because I've been driving for about 4 hours. So yeah, I left Carlisle and I thought, well, if I can get to Greenock, I'm nearly there. And it's nearly the 29th of September. And if I get on the ferry and get over to the other side onto Bute, then I'll be really pleased. But I was also pleased at just getting to Greenock. I'd never taken the road before. I've never actually drove up there, because I've been up there, but it was my mum or her boyfriend at the time that did all the driving. So as the road climbed higher and higher, lined with beautiful palm trees, rivers, and a sky that felt like it was opening something up for me, at the same time a little bit scary. So there was a bit of tension and excitement as I continued to go up and up and up, to the point it felt like we was almost at the same level of the mountains that surrounded us. I mean, absolutely beautiful scenery. So by the time I reached Greenup, I thought, oh, I'll sit down, relax, have something to eat, chill. And then I had something and I thought, no, I'm going to go today. I'm going to get on the ferry. And my anxiety hit the roof. And it reminded me of when I was a kid, because I used to get a lot of anxiety when I was traveling before. But when you're a kid, you don't necessarily understand things. It's all out of your control. Everybody else is making decisions. But when I'd last been on a ferry, it was really rocky and stormy, and we were crashing about everywhere. So it wasn't a pleasant trip. And a lot of my memories of Scotland were of travel sickness and rough weather. Because I think when we went to Edinburgh, we went to the Tattoo, and so that's in autumn. I can't remember the exact date actually, but it was cold and wet, very cold and wet. And so my anxiety was high as I approached the ferry dock. Anyway, I drove on and I was really pleased. It's that sense of personal triumph when you thinking about doing something. I nearly avoided it. I was going to park the van on one side and do the park and ride, but I still had to get to the different places on the island. So I thought, nope, Mel, come on, do it. And that's the thing is, this trip, Wales, in fact, all of the campervan trips, but my sense of adventure and what I'm going for has probably grown in terms of my courage and my resilience at managing that, because that anxiety I had was really quite overwhelming. And at the same time, knowing I was going to arrive on the island and thinking, what if I don't find anything out? What if it's a wasted journey? And then I had to sort of talk to myself, because I felt like my mum and my uncle were with me. Just this sense that I wasn't on my own. So I drove onto the ferry and went up to the deck for a drink, stood on the deck and just looked at all this scenery around me. Absolutely stunning. The sea, the hills, the greyness of the sky, it all felt really surreal. It really did. As if I was being carried into another layer of my own story. And I'd been kind of going deeper and deeper as I was visiting churches and looking at the history and thinking about my mum as a Scottish person and my dad and my brothers. So I got onto the other side and I thought I'll do a little drive. It was only about 3 o'clock, I think. I'll start having a bit of a drive around the island. So I had the sea to the left and I carried on driving down this road. And then it looked like it was getting really steep all of a sudden. And I thought, right, no, I'm a bit tired. I don't know if I want to manage any more anxiety evoking trips up high roads, hoping the van doesn't roll back down. So I turned into a side road and I got to the end, realised it was a dead end, and then tried to do a 3-point turn and got a bit stuck. And this guy came up and said, sort of helped me reverse out. He said, I'll just reverse into that drive and then turn round. And he asked me like where I was going. I said, oh, I'm actually just arrived. I've not been here for a long time. I'm looking to find where my nan lived. I've got some information. And all I had was, I knew the road was very, very steep where she lived when I visited as a kid, trying to walk down it. And I knew it was near town because we didn't have a car. And also that Lena Zavaroni had grown up on the same street as where my mum had lived. So he said, oh, that's funny. I know the cousin because the family still live on the island and she was a child star in the 70s and 80s. So a lot of people have sort of in their 50s and 60s will know the name. And he said, oh, I pass her every day. She walks her dog and I walk my dog. And, maybe she knows something about your family. So I gave him a number and I said, okay, you never know, do you, where these things go. And the next morning he called me, bless him, and he'd been in church. And there's a couple there that he knows, that he talks to, and he was telling them that he'd met me. And it turns out they live on the same road. They still live in the houses that are still there, but where my nan lived, houses have been knocked down now. But they knew my uncle as well, because he used to go back every year. And anyway, he invited me up, and Billy took me up to the house. And we sat there for a couple of hours reminiscing and talking about my uncle and what they knew about him and my nan and some of the other stories in the family. So, they They even told me the pain that she carried when her husband left, and there had always been a bit of secrecy around, you know, my mum's birth and what was going on in the family at the time. We were never able to get enough information to piece it together. And of course, she left when she was pregnant with the third boy, and didn't go back until much later. So it was as though all the half-told family stories I'd grown up with were now being voiced back to me. And it was very surreal because I don't have those experiences very often. And it was tender, emotional, and on the exact date of my mum's anniversary. So it choked me up a few times, and bless them, to deal with this strange woman getting emotional in their living room. And it was so strange walking in the living room. There were so many things that reminded me of the way my mum used to have her living room. So I felt her presence everywhere, as though she and my uncle were orchestrating the meetings. So it was that sort of layers of belonging. And they told me something that took my breath away. And they said, if your mother and grandmother was born here, you'll call her Brandane. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd been included into a system that I didn't know anything about. And so that belonging, I couldn't put it into words, but it just felt nice, you know? And, you know, I was saying, well, what does that mean? And this, your gran was here, and your mum was born here, and you're coming here. And I was like, wow. And they were so sweet. I sat there for a few hours. So later that day, I met Billy again, and he's an extraordinary man. 84, I think. Billy, I'm sorry if I've got your age wrong, but he's amazing for his age. He doesn't even look past 60. And he told me about his life. He's lived a really full life. How he's worked as an Elvis. I think impersonate is the wrong thing, wrong word. About the cars that he had, and he showed me pictures of his cars and his family and his lovely wife. And how he's a taxi driver in Glasgow, and just felt that sense of not being safe a lot of the time, and got onto the island and realised it was just very calm and safe place to be, and decided he wanted to live there. And so he lived there, and he's built houses and lived in various different houses, had a band, and he had all these pictures that he showed me later. And is an absolutely lovely person because he really bent over backwards to help me and help me connect. And as he spoke, I realised this wasn't just about my search for heritage, because he was interested in doing the same thing, but it was about human connection and how our stories echo and mirror each other when we dare to share them. And how synchronistic it was that I happened to turn into his road at that time of the day, and he then connected with all the other people. Because I also said to everybody, I'm also looking for somebody called Bobby. He's got a farm. And they recognised him, and they said, oh, we think it's this Bobby. And they said, drive up to the dump and go past this farms up there. So I later on in the afternoon, I drove up, and I ended up at one of the houses, knocked on the door, and this man opened. I said, are you Bob? And he said, yeah. And he said, are you James's niece? I was like, oh my God, how does he know? And he said, James always talked about me. And, you know, James used it from when he left Scotland. My uncle came to England, Manchester in the late 80s. And he went up every year and visited and spent time with Bobby and his wife. And he was just talking really fondly of him. And then he'd call him every few weeks. So it was just another lovely encounter as I sat there talking to his wife. And they talked about their daughter, and I knew who it was because my uncle had told me that she does Scottish dancing and she'd won lots of competitions. And Bobby was telling me that my uncle tossed the caber and used to go to the Highland Games and won a few prizes. And it was all of the different stories that my uncle had also shared with me, and it was beautiful. So at the same time, I'm kind of thinking about my lads and, you know, the heritage that was very sort of fragmented for me, and kind of made it difficult for me when I was growing up in terms of knowing who I really was. And I've talked about it on another on another podcast, because I grew up with my mum and my dad was Irish Italian, but he wasn't around when I was growing up. Mum, you know, we had Scottish food and I guess Scottish culture, and my mum had a strong Scottish accent for a long time. But we were, as far as I know, we were the only Scottish family. There was a lot of Irish families in Manchester and Liverpool at the time. And we talked about religion, and I talked about that on my visit to the cathedral, and talking about St. Hild as well, you know, and how my mum had rejected mainstream religion and the way she saw it. And then I found out that when my uncle went back to the island and my nan wasn't doing too well, he'd organised for her to go into a home that was run by the Salvation Army, and my mum had a big heart for the Salvation Army. They'd helped her out a lot, I think, when she come down to Manchester, and was really struggling. So all these different layers of stories just started to unfold, and I also felt the pull as well to make something tangible and start something tangible for the next generation. And I bought some gifts for my granddaughter while I was there. I wanted to get her some things. So I bought her a doll with a tartan outfit on, because I'd also been given a Scotch doll when I was a child, a tartan purse for the abundance with some money inside. The tea towel reminded me of when my mum used to do a lot of baking. She used to make these amazing biscuits. Even the kids in the neighbourhood used to come round and ask for the biscuit tin. And then a necklace with a sea quote and a dolphin, because she told me that she loves dolphins and she wants to touch one day. And each item carried meaning, and each one was a thread of memory that I wanted her to hold as part of her story, because it's the stories that we grow up with that really influence the way that we see ourselves in terms of our class, race, culture, money, what we've got access to, everything, you know. And we came from very, very humble beginnings, very. And so it wasn't just a visit, it was a reconciliation with my family history, the hidden silences, the gaps, the secrecies, and the grief that still flows at times but nourishes, because I felt that. I felt something moving within me. And sometimes you don't know why you're feeling like that. You just have to experience it and let it flow. And that's the essence of changing spaces, really. It's not just about driving to towns and coastlines. It's about driving into our inner landscapes, facing our past and finding new ways of belonging as we go through these different life phases. So on Bute, I wasn't just a traveller, I became a Brandane. I became a granddaughter returning home, and even my Scottish accent started to reappear, although everybody would probably still call me English. And everyone was lovely on the island. I went to a few different cafes, had coffee, bought some gifts, stayed in a nice hotel because I wanted a bit of luxury for a few days. And I felt like my mum and uncle were with me every step of the way. I found out more about my nan and how things had been really tough for her. And I think I even stumbled online on the graves of what would have been my granddad, I guess. It's still unclear uh, who who he was the father of, whether it was just James or my mum as well. But it continues, and it's an absolutely beautiful island. And I went down towards Bannatyne port. It's much quieter down there. Rossi seems to be where most of the shops are, and Rossi's lovely, especially if you go further back into it. And they're so landscaped and clean. And Bannatyne area was just so beautiful. If you love walking and locks and going on boat rides, and it's so easy to get across to. It's so worth a visit if you're going to go over there. I mean, it's quiet now. There are some hotels open, and the weather, you know, is fickle because it's an island, so it can change at any point. But it's certainly worth a visit. So if you go up towards Scotland, make sure you get the ferry over to Bute, even if you just spend one night there and drive round or take your electric bikes and explore it. It's absolutely worth it. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening and me tracing my roots, and maybe thinking about if you've ever traced your roots or revisited a place tied to family or felt history rise up to meet you. I'd love to hear your stories. Share them in the comments or connect with me on my website or send me an email. Let me know what you thought of the podcast, the Changing Spaces, whether you're listening to it on Spotify or Patreon or YouTube. And many of these are going to be audio because I can't do them all in the morning and the light goes down at 7 o'clock. So even if you see me a little bit, I'm sat in the dark basically. It just feels apt to do it at this time. And so this is a nod and a blessing to everyone who's listening, and thank you for the universe for connecting with me with so many people. The moment I got to Bute, I feel utterly blessed and overwhelmed, I guess. So until we meet next time.